to hit. You're gonna have to hit OK.
Yeah.
Continue. Hit continue.
Yeah. The only problem is the recording is not really what we are saying as participants. It's only showing your screen and your voice.
Well, that's why I'm showing. No, it does show your voice. It does. I mean, you do have your voice, but I'm having it that if I put that on, so we can show both. Okay, let me go in front of the camera, and let us begin. Michael J, weren't you just on the phone? Okay. Michael J wants to be here and there at the same time. All right, here we go. Welcome, Michael J. Well, guys, lesson 6, fun lesson. It's very, very, very good lesson, very informative, and it's all going to be talking about the times of Mashiach. Now, like I said last week, a lot of the coming of Mashiach we don't find in many sources. So, for example, the laws of everyday life, that's discussed by many rabbis, but we'll call practical halacha discussed in many places. But what's going to happen when Mashiach comes is a matter of fact, it's a matter of law, it's discussed in the Midrash, but we really have to fall upon Maimonides, the Rambam, because he is the one that discusses it the most at length. Okay, so let's start off. You guys can post it in the chat. You can call it out. The question on page 246. When you think about in your mind about Messianic times, the Messianic era, what comes to mind? Let's see if we have money. Let me get my.
He mentioned the end of times. That sounds like it's talking about gloom and doom, not a.
So doom and gloom. Okay, very good. Ira, what do you say when you think of Messianic times? What comes to mind?
Peace.
Peace. Uncle Jay, what do you say?
All of my family members returning.
Resurrection of the dead. Who else is on the call? I don't see myself. Who else is on the call? I know someone else there. I'll let someone else. No? You're gonna make me come around to the front of the camera? Okay, so here's the issue. The issue is it's in the future. And there's a lot we don't know. Like everything, we have predictions based on the prophecy of exactly how they are going to play out.
Sorry.
What? Huh?
I'm here. Yael.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
there you go. I knew someone else. No, Yael, what do you think of when Mashiach comes?
I'm listening. I'm not. Okay? No. What I thinking?
Yeah.
Can you repeat, please?
The question is, when you think about the times of Mashiach, Messianic times, what's the first thing that comes to your head? What's going to be?
When?
No, what will be?
Wow. Big question.
Look on. What the first thing that pops into your mind? Yeah.
Good. I know. I like good. It's. I don't know.
Good. Times are going to be good. Okay. All right. Let's discuss what
Like will be good. You know
said.
when it will be good. Something. This is what the first word I can think.
Right. Okay. So like I started saying, Yogi Berra once said, it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. So a lot of what we know is based on prophecies of Yeshaya, of Yirmiyahu, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Micha, Zechariah, and references in the Torah. But like I said, a lot of it falls into what Maimonides writes. So we're going to go through different sections. Each one is really independent because it discusses a different outcome, what Mashiach is going to be. As always, please feel free to ask questions, interject, argue if you so wish. All questions, comments are welcome. Okay, let's begin with the with the relation, with the position of the Jewish people in the world. Now, the theme that we're going to repeat a lot in tonight's class is Maimonides' view. This is a very big difference of opinion between Maimonides, right, Moshe ben Maimon, and Nachmanides, or Moshe ben Nachman, is what will the transition be like, or what will the finished product be like? Is it going to be miraculous or natural? Nachmanides takes the view that the world will be full of miraculous events. Maimonides takes a much more toned down to earth, that everything is going to be miraculous in nature. A lot of what we're going to do tonight is we're going to try to use Maimonides' view, because for us to picture in our mind the course of the natural order changing is a little bit harder to digest intellectually. We have to fall back on belief. So let's try to get Maimonides as much as possible. And when we need to, we'll use other rabbis. But again, I want to stress and say that we're going to use Maimonides' view tonight, but there are many, many, many rabbis that discuss this and take other viewpoints. Okay. So first thing you have to know, what Maimonides says, is that in order for Mashiach to come, the world doesn't need to go through a dramatic change. That means, like I used the example I said last week, we're not going to grow wings and halos, and we're not going to ride rainbows and unicorns and all that. Like Maimonides says in text number 1a, everything is going to be the same. Do not presume, he says, that the world, the nature is going to change. The world will continue according to its pattern. Now, just like now miracles occur, miracles will occur then as well. But that is the exception to the rule, not the rule. But then we have, look at text 2b, text 248. Prophet Isaiah says, the leopard and the will lie down with the young goat. The sheep will dwell with the wolf. How do we reconcile the two? Maimonides says no miracles are going to occur, or no, nature is going to remain the same. It means a predator is going to remain a predator. And we have the prophet Zechariah. The prophet Zechariah predates the Rambam by 1,500 years more. Yeah, about 1,500 years. And he's a prophet. How could Maimonides argue with the prophet Zechariah? So Maimonides himself knows you're going to ask that question, and he answers that question. Text 1c, and he says like this: when the prophet Zechariah said the wolf will lie down with the lamb, he doesn't mean it literally. He's talking about that the world will be a peaceful place, and the Jewish people will be able to live in the land of Israel in peace without the threat of rockets. We're not going to have to worry about what the UN says. We're not going to have to worry about what the EU says. We're going to be able to live in the land of Israel in peace and do things our way without having to worry about attacks. And at first, Maimonides says peace will reign in the land of Israel, and then slowly it will grow in the whole world. The whole world will be a peaceful place, and that's what he says in text 1c. The interpretation of the prophecy is that the Jews will live at peace together, and the wicked Gentiles who wanted to hurt the Jews and devour the Jews like a wolf does, to prey, that no longer is going to happen. They will no longer seek to steal, destroy, but live at peace with Israel. So, although now Jewish people live in the land of Israel, and I think in the past 20, 30 years, now majority of Jews live inside the land of Israel. The world population used to be the other way around. But as we know, it just happened recently, they don't live peacefully in the land of Israel. So what Messianic time is going to be that the Gentiles won't bother the Jews. The Gentiles won't bother the Jews. And Maimonides says clearly, text number 2, the difference between present times in diaspora and the time, Messianic times, is that the use of words is the emancipation from the subjugation of Gentile governments. No more anti-Semitism, Jewish independence. We can worship how we want, and we can do what we want. Our land, our rules, and we won't have to worry about what the BBC says, NPR says, and everything is going to be fine. So now, question: does that sound in the realm of nature? Do you think that can happen naturally? I mean, I think, and Michael J is shaking his head again, but I think the answer is yes. I think we can all fathom a time, I know as crazy as it sounds, that the nations won't bother Israel and let us do what we want. I heard on the radio today that today is the anniversary, the 40th anniversary of when Israel bombed Iraq's nuclear reactor. And afterwards, everyone was a condemnation, all the nations of the world, the United States, everybody. How can you do such a thing? And they were interviewing the guy, or they had played an interview. The guy was saying, yeah, the nuclear reactor was only for peaceful purposes. Yeah, like I say, my foot, right? And we all know what Saddam Hussein did with rockets 10 years later in 1991. Thank God he didn't have nukes, okay? But you know, Israel's allowed to defend itself. Now it can't. Now it has to show restraint. It can't have, what do they call, disproportionate response, right? So Mashiach comes, that whole insanity, which is really insanity because the standard they have for Israel doesn't exist anywhere else. That's going to be gone. We'll be able to defend ourselves. We'll be able to live there peacefully. It's going to be complete freedom from any outside influence. We can do what we want, how we want, our land. Right? That's really step one of Messianic times. Our land, our rules. Right? You're like, you have your house, your rules. I went to someone's house the other day, had to take off my shoes. Their house, their rules. Right? Israel. Okay. So far, so good. Right? I think it's pretty straightforward. So Maimonides says, number one, that can happen. Now you have to realize when Maimonides wrote this is pretty crazy. Maimonides wrote this in the end of the 1100s. He wrote it in, I don't know where he wrote it, but he lived in Spain and he had to run away to Fez, and then he went to Alexandria. The concept of Jewish people living in Israel in the 1100s was, we were the Maimonides, the Christians, and the Muslims were fighting it out in the Crusades. So it was crazy then, but we see now it's not such a crazy idea. Okay, that is step number one, that is one aspect of Messianic times. Now, just because all the Jews are in Israel, that doesn't mean there's peace. In fact, the more Jews in Israel, usually there's more arguments. They've had 5 elections in like 5 weeks. What's the one thing that will bring the Jewish people together? Essential goal, right? There was a video I sent out on the chat where they're trying to get Naftali Bennett to speak bad about Netanyahu when the Palestinians were sending rockets. He said, listen, yes, we have differences, but right now we're all united. So there is a possibility for the Jewish people to all come together for one goal. But when Mashiach comes, it's not going to be because Hamas or our friends in the north, Hezbollah, are sending rockets. It's going to be a Jewish reason, a reason from us. And what is that? It's going to be one center of service. We're going to come together about one place. And that is going to be the Beis Hamikdash. Text number 3. Again, Maimonides. Messianic king. Remember, the Zion from the family of King David will arise and renew the Davidic dynasty. Remember, it has to be father, son, all the way down. And he restored to initial sovereignty. That means a sovereign nation without influence of other nations. He will build the temple where it's supposed to be, on the Temple Mount, and gather the dispersed of Israel. And in his days, the observance of all the statutes will return to the previous state. There's a lot in text 3. So the rest of the class, we're going to dissect, because as you see on the screen, there's a lot going on over here. We have Mashiach, we have the person, we have the government, we have the Beis Hamikdash, and gathering the dispersed of Israel. So now, for example, gathering dispersed of Israel, where are all the Jews? How are we going to build the Beis Hamikdash? Something right now, and observance of all the statutes. What does that mean? We have Torah law now. What's coming back? So let's get a bit. So before we go forward, any questions? Yes, no, because I'm gonna keep yapping until you guys. All right. So if you've been to the shul, hanging in the shul is the picture of the Beis Hamikdash. There were 2 Batei Mikdashes. There were 2 temples. The first temple was the temple built by Jerusalem. Now that temple was smaller because it was just a complex. The second temple was built in stages. That means first it was built when Ezra came with Nehemiah after the story of Purim, and it was a very, very modest temple because the Jewish community in Israel was not wealthy. The majority of the Jews and the wealthy Jews lived in Babylonia. Then it was remodeled numerous times. Then you have the story of Hanukkah as remodeled. Then the final renovation happened, and this is what we have the most archaeological evidence. It was by Herod, about 100 years before the destruction, and that's the diagram you have in the past. So now, if you go, I think I have a CD DVD where you can kind of take a tour, but you'll see what the Beis Hamikdash was. This was the core, the fundamental of Jewish observance. See, now it's the shul and davening and everything else. But back in the old days, the shul was really to remember, not to mimic, but to remember what's going on in the Beis Hamikdash. So in the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, you had the Kohanim, the Kohanim, the priest, the Levites who would assist, and then the Israelites who would stand there. You needed to have all 3 types of Jews present. So there's some Jews that couldn't make it to the Beis Hamikdash the entire time. So they obviously didn't reenact the service because they couldn't bring sacrifices outside the temple, but the Jews would get together in the center of town. That's when the shul got started.
Rabbi?
It was only after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Yeah.
Ellen wants to get in. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I didn't see it. Hold on. I will allow her in. I'm a nice guy. Hold on. Where's my mouse? I'm missing my mouse.
It was on the left-hand side and now just anyway.
Okay.
Here it is.
Okay. Welcome, Ellen. Okay. So, but the base. See, now we've gone. I mean, obviously, it's been 2,000 years. So we've got so accustomed to the shul being the central part of Judaism, and everything revolves around the shul. But in fact, anybody know how many practical mitzvahs we have now? How many mitzvahs? Anyone know? Well, how many mitzvahs are there? 613. How many of the 613? We're talking about not all the details. We're talking about the 600. How many of those 613 mitzvahs do we have now?
We still have all 630.
No. Practical now. The answer is 87.
That's a lot.
87, because most of them apply in Israel under a sovereign, a Jewish government. When I say Jewish government, I mean not a government made up of Jewish people, a government run according to Jewish law, put it that way, with a temple. So there's a lot of intricate laws of purity, impurity, sacrifices, and everything else. So Jewish life revolved around what was going on in the temple. Here's a short video just to show you what's going on in the temple. But let me.
God told the Jews at Sinai to build a temple so that his presence could dwell among them, a place to worship, to gather as a nation, to receive atonement, inspiration, and instruction. Half a millennia later, God's desired location for a permanent home was revealed to King David in the ancient city of Jerusalem, atop a hillside known for Abrahamic times as Mount Moriah. David's son, King Solomon, completed a magnificent structure that attracted the title Beit HaMikdash and Beit HaPrira. It was fashioned with much gold, expensive woods, and precious materials. When it was completed in 827 BCE, the nation gathered to witness God's presence fill the temple. The mountain gained a new name, Har Habayit. At its summit, a stone building rose to enormous height. Within its gaping entrance was the Ulam, a lobby, beyond which was the Kodesh, furnished with 3 golden items, an altar for incense, a 7-branched menorah, and a table with racks for the showbread. At the sanctuary's far end, a separated area enclosed the temple's core, its most sacred location, the Kodesh HaKodashim, that held the Oron, the Ark of God, containing the tablets that Moses delivered at Sinai. The Ark of God rested upon a naturally protruding plateau, known as the Foundation Rock. Immediately outside the building, the courtyard of the Kohanim, priests, held a massive stone sacrificial altar with a lengthy access ramp. Nearby was the Kior, a cistern for rinsing hands and feet, and a platform for the Levites to chant psalms and play instruments. Further back, a larger area was designed for public assembly, known as the Woman's Courtyard. It included an extensive wooden balcony for women. The nation would gather 3 times each year to celebrate the festivals of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. The compound was surrounded by a massive wall and contained a series of steps, numerous gateways, and guard posts. The temple's layout was exceptionally efficient, with compartments and chambers for every possible need, such as storage areas for wood, oil, and other materials, production and preparation areas, rooms for clothing, for weaponry in case of attack, ritual immersion pools, sleeping and eating areas, tool and instrument reserves, lockers for the priests, a charity room, a hall for Torah study, a chamber for the Sanhedrin, a lounge for temple officials, a repair workshop, animal holdings, ticket stations, and so on. There were separate entrances for distinct purposes, an oversight system, and honor guards. A small stream ran beneath the temple, which was used to maintain cleanliness. The temple stood for 4 centuries. It was destroyed by the Babylonian army in 423 BCE, rebuilt in 349 BCE, and stood for 4 centuries more until it was destroyed by the Romans in 69 of the Common Era. Through his prophets, God promised the Jews a 3rd and eternal temple in the Messianic era, from which his presence will spread to the world, embracing all of humanity.
All right. Okay. So again, if anyone wants a further in depth, I have some software. I'm not sure if it's online or CD. Okay. So this house was built on the foundation stone. What's the foundation stone? The foundation stone is where everything, is based on. The entire world, as we've said in previous classes, was created for a purpose. What's that purpose? For the Jewish people and to do the Torah and to teach all humanity. That means the temple wasn't just to serve the Jewish people. The temple was there, the Beis HaMikdash was there to serve all humanity. In fact, on the holiday of Sukkot, the Jewish people, there were 70 root nations. Right? Noah came off the ark. They had those 70 children from Shem, Cham, and Yafes are the 70 root nations, and they would bring a sacrifice to pray for all the nations of the world. The temple wasn't just a source of blessing for the Jewish people. The Beis HaMikdash was a source of blessing for the entire humanity. That's why the rabbis say in text 4 if the nations of the world would know the amount of blessing they were getting, instead of destroying it, they would guard it. So we see here. So now what's going to happen? Now, is the concept based on, I'll give you a hint, based on what we learned previously, is the concept of building a temple on a Jewish temple on the Temple of Mount Miraculous?
Sounds miraculous. It sounds like you built it.
What do you think is going to have to happen? Well, now you think about this, there's other structures there. What do you think is going to have to happen? And again, not miraculous. What do you think is going to have to happen for us to be able to build a Beis Hamikdash there?
You're gonna have to get rid of the structures that are there and demolish them.
Well,
You're gonna, and
Yeah,
there
but-
was
but
another
we're talking about
question.
yeah.
The foundation stone that you talk about, is that the rock that's underneath the dome of the rock?
Good question.
Because I saw that back in '68.
Right. So I'll answer I'll try to answer very quickly because this class is limited in time. And again, this is a fascinating subject. And we have a few more fascinating subjects to go through. So there are some people who say that that is the foundation stone. I mean, that's why that building is called the Dome of the Rock. However, Maimonides brings down as a fact of law based on the verses in I think it's Yechezkel. I think in the prophet Ezekiel or in Jeremiah, that when Hashem said that the Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed, he said it will lay desolate, will be waste until the temple is destroyed again. So it would go against the very prophecy to have another building, let alone a building of service not in line with what Hashem wants in the place of the temple. So now, if you look at the Temple Mount, if you can envision it, you're looking at the western wall. On the right side, you have one mosque, Al-Aqsa. On the other side, you have the Golden Dome. Now, what's on the other side of the western wall? Nothing. Trees. If you take that complex, which was in the video, right? Not the entire platform, just the complex, the hall, the courtyard, it fits perfectly right there. So the answer is no, but it could be yes. Like I said, we don't know. We'll find out soon.
Typical Jewish answer.
No, I mean there are some people that say yeah, it is there. If you go to the tunnel tours in Jerusalem, there and you go, they'll take you to this place which is opposite the rock of the Dome of the Rock, and some people pray there. So again, we're going to go with Maimonides. Maimonides says as a fact of law. The rules in law, again, he doesn't just make it up. He has a verse to back it up. So, and it makes, and that part of the western wall was always left open. It was never covered. And it says the Shekhinah, it's brought down in the Gemara, the Midrash, the Shekhinah, God's presence, never left from the western wall. So it makes a lot of sense and a lot of other clues that it should be where the western wall is now. The fact that they built it on top of a rock, I mean, okay, we don't know. So now, let's get back to the question I asked. How do you think a miraculous transition would be? A miraculous way, a natural, not miraculous, a natural way, order would be for the Jewish people to build a temple on the Temple Mount. No war. Remember, Mashiach coming is no war. It's not bombing. It's not nuking anything, right? What do you think based on what we said in prior classes? What do you think can happen? I give you a hint that has something to do with text 4, and if you read text 5. Answer sort of on the screen also. Anyone sniffing? Anyone want to give it a guess? No? Let me try to lead you to the answer. Why is there not going to be any war when Mashiach comes? Because people will, we discussed this in lesson 1, people will realize that there's no reason that you are not challenging me, right? We're all in this together. So when the Gentiles realize the value of the temple, they will assist the Jewish people in building the temple. It's not going to be some cataclysmic event that there's going to be a massive war and the Israelis are going to bomb the Palestinians and they're going to take the dynamite and, it's not going to be a whole thing. And we said before that Israel is going to live in, the Jewish people are going to live in their land and we can do what we want. Temple Mount is ours, we're going to destroy everything. That's not, that's the very antithesis of what Mashiach is all about. Again, Mashiach is not just a redemption for the Jewish people, it's a redemption for humanity. Yes, it will come about through the Jewish people, but it's a redemption for the entire world, all of God's creations, including the Gentiles. So, like we said, you see on the screen, endorsed by all nations. So when Mashiach comes, they're going to realize, and by us teaching them that the base of English is the source of blessing. The text 5, the Navi Yeshaya says, they're going to come and say, come. They're going to say, let us listen to what the Jewish people have to say. Let us listen to the teachings of the children of Jacob. So it's not that, this is a strictly Jewish concept. You don't have to be Jewish to merit the redemption. You don't have to be Jewish to merit Mashiach. And in fact, Mashiach comes, there's still going to be Gentiles. There's not going to be conversion, but there'll still be Gentiles. And there's going to be Jews and Gentiles, and everything's going to be the same. It's just we're going to see each other as teammates rather than competitors. And therefore, they'll notice the value of the base of English. Any questions so far, or up until this point? Make sense?
Does Gentiles include Muslims?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You see, when
because I've always had that term applied to Christians,
What?
I've always heard that term applied to Christians.
Yeah, okay, but we'll call them non-Jews.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I meant. I don't know, what does the word Gentile come from? I don't know. There's Goy, the other nations. All right. Okay. In text number 3, we spoke about, and number 1, we spoke about the person being from King David's family, and we discussed that at length last week. We spoke about the rebuilding of the temple, which we just said is plausible when we all work together. Now, another thing he said was that there's going to be the ingathering of the exiles. I mean, the Jewish people we know live in the diaspora, and when Maimonides wrote, you should know, there have been many books published on how Maimonides chose his words. Maimonides was very careful. His wording is exact. The placement of each concept is exact. So when he writes that the gathering of the exiles is going to be after the building of the temple, that means that he seems to indicate, that by building the temple, that is going to trigger the Jewish people to come home. That means it's not that the Jewish people, and this, by the way, is significant, because until now, even with the state of Israel, Jewish people have been going to Israel. Why? Because they've been fleeing antisemitism. They've been fleeing persecution, wherever it is. But Maimonides is saying here something different. The Jewish people are going to come to Israel not because of something the Gentiles are doing. They're going to sense the holiness of Israel. they're going to sense the holiness of Jerusalem and the centrality of the temple, that they need to be there. We're going to pick up and go there, not because someone is pushing us out, because we want to be there. And that goes for all Jewish people.
Does that mean that all Jews will go to Israel?
Yes. Exactly what I'm saying.
Double check.
All Jews are going to go to Israel again, not because we're being kicked out of where we are now, or we need a state to protect us from persecution, which is really what we have now, right? Well, remember when there was a tremendous amount of antisemitism in France and Jews were being attacked. So Bibi Netanyahu was saying, come to Israel, you'll be protected here. That's not Messianic times. Messianic times is we're saying, number one, we're going to live in Israel in peace. Number two, we're going to come to Israel not because the anti-Semites are doing something to us or they're threatening us, or we want to be able to wear a yarmulke in public, which, I said last week, that guy in New York said, or Washington said, Jews shouldn't wear the yarmulke in public, right? So I can go to Israel, I can wear my yarmulke in public. That's not the idea. The idea of Messianic times is we will understand the holiness and the purpose of us living in Israel. We're going to be drawn, you can see on the screen, we're going to be drawn by the holiness of land. Now, interestingly, this is a very, very fascinating topic, which always gets asked. Maimonides doesn't talk about certain Jews. Doesn't talk about the 10 tribes. People always ask, 10 lost tribes. Are they coming back? Well, if they come back, they're not lost, right? So, so the question is, what's with the 10 tribes? So let me give you a little background. So we know that there are the 12 tribes. Well, Jacob had 12 sons, right? One son, Levi, is not considered a tribe. It's a family. It's not a tribe. They didn't get a tribe means you get a plot of land in Israel. They didn't get a plot. The family of Levium, Kohanim, their job was to serve in the temple. They're not considered a tribe. They're considered a family. Okay, we'll call them a family. Joseph was split into two, Ephraim and Manasseh. So the 12 tribes, right? David King Saul was the first king of all 12 tribes. That only lasted a very short time. David Melech, King David was a unanimous king over everyone, followed by his son, King Solomon. King Solomon builds the temple. Okay, when King Solomon dies, his son makes some political missteps. I mean, this was predicted by the prophet, and there was a break-off. It was a secession. There were the 10 northern tribes, and then there were the 2 southern tribes. 2 southern tribes are the tribes of Yehuda, Judah, and the tribe of Benjamin, and the families of the Levium and the Kohanim, because the temple was in the southern kingdom, or called the Judean kingdom, and they all, because they worked in the temple mostly, so they lived in that area. Now, obviously, there weren't Levium and Kohanim in the northern kingdom. Now, the prophets tell us. You look in the book of Kings. The prophets tell us that the northern kingdom was by far a lot more wicked and a lot more astray from Judaism than the southern kingdom. They served idols, they did a lot more things. So because of that, God brought about upon them punishment and destruction. So good, I think 150 years before
the lost tribes of Israel, they usually have in mind the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom that fell to Assyria about 722 BC. These tribes are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and Joseph, whose tribe was divided into the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Most of the people of the northern kingdom were deported to ancient Assyria. Many of the Jews who remained in the land intermarried with people from Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, who had been sent by the Assyrian king to inhabit Samaria. Thus, the story goes, the 10 northern tribes of Israel were lost to history and either wiped out or assimilated into other people groups. This narrative, however, is based on inference and assumption rather than on direct biblical teaching. There are many mysteries, legends, and traditions as to what happened to the 10 lost tribes of Israel. One legend says that the 10 tribes migrated to Europe. The Danube River, they say, got its name from the tribe of Dan. Another legend says that the tribes migrated all the way to England and that all Anglo-Saxons are today actually Jews. This is a teaching of the heretical British Israelism. A surprising number of groups around the world claim to have descended from the lost tribes. There are people in India, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and North America who all claim such ancestry. Other theories equate the Japanese or the American Indians with the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The truth is that the lost tribes of Israel were never really lost. Many of the Jews who remained in the land after the Assyrian conquest were united with Judah in the south. Assyria was later conquered by Babylon, who went on to invade the southern kingdom of Israel, deporting the 2 remaining tribes, Judah and Benjamin. Remnants of the northern tribes would have thus been part of the Babylonian deportations. 70 years later, when King Cyrus allowed the Israelites to return to Israel, many from all 12 tribes returned to Israel to rebuild their homeland. The idea that 10 tribes of Israel were lost is false. God knows where all 12 tribes are, and, as the Bible itself proves, they are all accounted for.
I apologize. I thought this video was after the next slide. So as we were saying, so that video was supposed to be afterward. So what happened was, they were, because they were more wicked, and you look in the kings, you see in the Navi Hosea, he was a prophet in the northern kingdom. Eliyahu was a prophet in the northern kingdom. He said, listen here, guys, you've been corrupted beyond repair. The Syrian king comes and they're gone. The Syrian king, led by the general Sanhedrin, the policy was displacement. They would take the indigenous people and they would move them and they'd move everyone around. So with these 12 tribes, what happened to them? Are they coming back? Are they lost forever? If they're not lost forever, then they're not lost. So you see, there's an argument, text number 6, between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. This is on page 255. And Rabbi Akiva says, that's it, they're gone. They'll never come back. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, they are coming back. Now, why does Maimonides say it? Because it's not doesn't matter practically, according to Jewish law, whether they're coming back or not. The one of the most prevailing and actually it's very, very logical theories is that you have to assume that some members of all the tribes lived around the temple. So as I said before, in order for the service in the temple to take place, you not only did you have priests and Levites, you also needed Israelites to be present there. You need all elements of the Jewish people to be present there, and all members, every tribe had to send representatives. So imagine you lived in Dun, which is all the way in the north. Imagine having to go every month. You had to. It's only logical to assume that members of each tribe lived around Jerusalem. So now, who was from each tribe? We don't know. It actually says in the Midrash, the Mashiach will sort everyone out, which tribe they come from. Some people say, no, they're gone. Again, does it really matter? No. And Maimonides is a book of law. It's not a book of theory. So that's why they say he didn't bring it up. You see over here, this is from an old book. I think Amsterdam 1695. It's in your book as well, 265. This is a page from a Passover Haggadah. And you could see the 12 tribes. Again, it's in Hebrew, but it's, okay. Oh, I have another video. This is from the Aish.
The fall of the northern kingdom of Israel and the destruction by the Assyrians creates one of the great mysteries of Jewish history. Those 10 lost tribes, which is a huge chunk of the Jewish people who follow what is really the normal pattern that any nation would follow. If you're exiled from your country and you get sent somewhere else and you don't come back, eventually you assimilate. Now, there are Jewish traditions that say that obviously a huge number of those Jews fled south to the southern kingdom of Judah. There's a tradition that Jeremiah brought the tribes back. But it's also fascinating that a lot of those Jews disappeared. We have a tradition, too, that in the Messianic era they will come back also. But that's in the future. But we understand that this question of the lost tribes is one of the most interesting topics, in terms of great mysteries of Jewish history. There are so many people running around the world today who are not Jewish, but who claim to be connected or from the lost tribes. And as you travel around the world, you bump into these people everywhere. My favorite example is the Pashtunim in Afghanistan today, by the Khyber Pass. These are serious Taliban Muslim fundamentalists, but they have a tradition that they're one of the lost tribes. And they're actually called the Jewish Muslims because they have so many interesting Jewish type style customs that they do in addition to the Muslim things that they do. And they could well be one of the lost tribes, but they're one of many people. But it illustrates a bigger point about the Jewish people and the world today. We were a very significant percentage of the ancient world. Today, we're 1/4% of the world's population. At so many different periods of time, not just thousands of years ago, the destruction of the Northern Kingdom, large numbers of Jews, whether it's the expulsion from Spain in the future, we'll see all different periods of time, large numbers of Jews were lost to the Jewish people. Which brings us to the reality of the world today, that probably for every person in this world who is a Jew, there are probably 1,000 people who have Jewish blood that are not Jewish. And we understand as Jews that in the Messianic era, the Messiah, who will be a prophet, will finally have the ability to come to the world and say to each and every person and each and every Jew, not only what tribe you're from, but he'll also be able to finally tell us who and who isn't a Jew, and then we'll finally know how many Jews are really in the world.
So he made a reference, by interesting. I just want to touch on it. That it says that Yirmiyahu, prophet Jeremiah, went bring back 10 tribes, and he brought back some. So again, it's another way how we have remnants. And he also touched on another fact that many people have assimilated throughout the years, and there are many theories about vast areas of Spain, for example, that have Jewish blood. There's I forgot who ruled Spain or World War II, but he was a fascist. But interestingly, although he's a fascist,
Franco,
right? He didn't give up any Jews because he said if I was under Hitler's rule, I also would be taken away because he had some Jewish blood. So taking the 10 tribes away, we know for a fact that Jews have been assimilated, and there are many Jews throughout the world now. The people that don't know they're Jewish, or people that think they're Jewish and they're not. Halachically, I will tell you that if someone comes and says I'm Jewish, but they do not have some lineage, some documentation, some proof, then they have to undergo what's called a conversion out of doubt, meaning because we don't know. Could be yes, it could be no. It's called gir l'chum, because we just don't know. For the example, the Ethiopians, we have no idea. And it's one of the things Mashiach is going to do. He's going to kind of sort it out. Okay, questions? Proceed. Good to go. Good. Proceed. Okay. Another thing text 3 mentioned was restoration of the law. Now, the way Jewish law was that Hashem gave Moshe the Torah on Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and then Moshe instituted a panel of the elders of the Sanhedrin, the 70 rabbis. Now, the way it works is that anytime we had a doubt of what the law is, we go for one panel, and then basically the Supreme Court, they would decide the law. There was no such thing as an argument. There was no arguments. If you didn't know, they hashed it out until they figured it out. So now we have arguments. One rabbi said, in the olden days, there were no such thing as arguments. It was only when the Sanhedrin was disbanded, and then there was also forgetfulness, that this concept of arguments between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. That all happened afterwards when we didn't remember. But as long as we remember, or we had the Sanhedrin, then there there was no there were no arguments. Now, in the temple, if you remember in the video, there was a chamber where the Sanhedrin met. So it was actually the main Supreme Court, and there were two lower courts of 23 judges. Now, the Romans kicked the Jews out of Jerusalem. If you remember from last class, right? Hadrian came and renamed it. He actually banished no Jews who were allowed. There were actually hundreds and hundreds of years the Jews were not allowed in the city of Jerusalem. And the Sanhedrin moved from Jerusalem to Yavne, and they moved from Yavne to another city, and finally they moved up to Tiberias, Tiberia. And it was there in the years 360 something that they were disbanded for good. Now, and that's why we pray for the restoration of the Sanhedrin, because once you have a Jewish king, right? Remember, Maimonides went in order. You have a Jewish king, and you have a temple, and you have the Sanhedrin. Now you can have a restoration of all the mitzvot, because the Sanhedrin, one of their jobs was to set a calendar. See, now we have a calendar, and Chabad would put out a calendar. You can put your birthdays and everything else, and advertisements. But in the old days, you couldn't do that. You couldn't put advertisements in the calendar because you didn't know when the calendar was going to be. One of the things that the Sanhedrin did was they set the calendar, and it was like every month. Now we know exactly when. I mean, even though they knew then also, but the very first mitzvah given to the Jewish people is. Anybody? You know something? That's it. Yeah. The very first mitzvah given to the Jewish people was the sanctification of the moon. So, although God taught Moshe exactly the cycle of the moon, God said, "I want them to sanctify the Bezdin should do it by witnesses. Witnesses would come every month. So we saw the moon, and then the court would question them exactly the position of the moon and everything else. And then because the lunar cycle is 29 and a half days, the Jewish month could have either 29 or 30 days. That was like the main job of the Sanhedrin. It's interesting that we have one place in the world which is called the Holy Land. The world is made up of 3 dimensions. It's called Olam, Nefesh, Zman. Olam is world, Nefesh is person, Zman is time. So we have the holiest place in the world is the Holy Land. Then we have the Jewish people, which are the holy people. Now, what do? The holy people, their job was to sanctify time. God asked us, although time runs, right? It's natural, it runs on a cycle, but God asked us to sanctify time. Like, for example, on the Kiddush of Shabbos, how do we end up? Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat, right? We sanctify time. Also, on the Kiddush of the holidays, we say Mekadesh Yisrael V'Hazmani. You sanctify the Jewish people and time. God wants us to tie all 3 dimensions: place, time, and person. Our job is to sanctify time. So even though whether or not you agree Shabbos, sundown on Friday night is, well, Shabbos is Shabbos, Hashem still wants us to take a cup of wine and sanctify time. Now, that's represented by the Sanhedrin. So if you look at text number 8, Maimonides says, it's page 257, the Sanhedrin was disbanded from Tiberia, and it's going to reconvene in Tiberia. Do you know where Maimonides is buried?
Tiberia?
Yeah, Maimonides is buried in Tiberia. Come with me to Israel. I have not answered. Maimonides is buried. Why did he want to be buried in Tiberia? Because Maimonides is the great codifier, the great lawgiver. It says, from Moses to Moses, no one rose like Moses. Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, is the lawgiver, and he wanted to be buried in Tiberia. So when the lawgivers all reconvene, the coming of Mashiach, he says, I want to be there. That's like a kid in the candy store, right? The Rambam wanted to be there. So the job of the Sanhedrin was to sanctify the time. Now, how do we have the calendar if we have no Sanhedrin? Because Hillel, not the Hillel, his great grandson, he lived like a long time afterwards. What he did was he was the head of Sanhedrin in the 300s of the Common Era, and he sanctified all Rosh Chodesh. And because again, the rabbis knew, because the mathematical cycle we have now, Maimonides writes it, but he didn't figure it out. That was passed down from rabbi. So what's interesting, by the way, when the witnesses came, they weren't giving the rabbis any new information. The rabbis knew when Rosh Chodesh was. They were asking the witnesses questions to see if they actually saw the moon, or they just wanted to be the guys that saw the moon. You know, the ones on TikTok. You know, I did it, or maybe they saw it was cloudy, and maybe they thought they saw it. But so Hillel was able to sanctify all the Rosh Chodesh from then until Mashiach. So when Mashiach comes, we're not going to need to rely on the set calendar. We're going to go back, and it's going to clear up. We referenced this last week. Clear up all the questions that we don't know. Because remember, when Sanhedrin, they are the panel of Jewish law, and it's going to reestablish. If you remember, what building is that? I'm looking at the building. And they also, if you see, there's a picture on your screen of a chain. They're going to reestablish the unbroken chain of rabbis. Remember last week we spoke about Eliyahu Navi, the student of Achia Shalini, who got smicha. Smicha, lean your hand. Remember we spoke about this last week? You watched last week plus? Smicha means lean hand. In order to be a member of the Sanhedrin, you need to be ordained rabbi. Not like we have today. Ordained rabbi means passed down from unbroken chain from Moses, Joshua, all the way down. That's going to come back when Mashiach comes. Any questions? How come I'm not getting a response here? Oh, here we go.
How will it come back?
Huh?
How will it come back?
Oh, so he said because Eliyahu Navi, Elijah, never died. If you look at Kings 2, he went up to heaven and checked. And he was a student of Achia Shalini, who was from the ones that left Egypt. So Achia Shalini was ordained by Joshua, ordained by Moses. Yeah, so that's going to be but that's a whole nother discussion how it's going to come back. All right, let's get more juicy. Ready, guys? I'm sure you guys are going to like this topic. Will the world come to an end before it comes to an end? Does Judaism believe in Armageddon? Apocalypse? What do you think?
Question might be who are Gog and Magog?
So Gog and Magog. So there's a prophecy in Isaiah that says we're going to move on now to part 3, which is text 258. There's a paragraph there, right? Armageddon. So the word Armageddon, by the way, is a Greek word for Mount Megiddo. And so you look in Christian sources and all that, they're full of that stuff. We don't have, in fact, there is no Jewish word for Armageddon or apocalypse or anything like that. They seem to have ripped off the idea from a prophecy in Zechariah, which says that there will be great mourning in Jerusalem because of a war, and this war will happen in the valley of Megiddo, which is in Israel. So they somehow they took that idea and they made it into it's going to be terrible times. So let me tell you what the Jewish people say. The Jewish people say that before Mashiach comes, and again, when the before Mashiach comes, right? I can say before I go to Israel, it can be 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, who knows? But so before Mashiach comes, there's going to be a war waged by a general king, named Gog, who's going to be the king of a place called Magog, and that is going to be at the beginning of the Messianic age. And you see text number 9, Maimonides writes, a straightforward interpretation is 259. The prophet's words seem to indicate that imply that a war of Gog and Magog will occur at the beginning of Messianic times, before this war a prophet will arise to inspire Israel, and the coming of Mashiach. Now, the second paragraph is probably the most important thing the Rambam says. All of these events cannot be definitely known until they occur, because the prophets didn't say exactly how and when they're going to occur. So we know sort of what's going to happen, but we don't know in what sequence of events are going to happen. We know Eliyahu Navi is going to come. We know Mashiach is going to come. We know there's going to be a resurrection of the dead. We know there's going to be the building of the temple. We know there's going to be all these things, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So, no, I don't. There you go. The details are unknown, and most importantly, this war is not going to affect the Jewish people. It's going to be a war that happens. It's not going to be a war waged upon the Jewish people. What the prophet is saying is there's going to be this great turmoil in the world. Now, over the past 2,000 years, how many times has there been great turmoil in the world? Yesterday, right? So the question is, what is the prophet referring to? We don't know. But if you look at text number 10, what this reference is, what Rabbi Shimon is saying in the name of Shimon Bar Yochai is, forget about Gog and Magog. Worry about your kids, okay? Worry if your kids are going to grow up to be a mensch. Stop worrying about what's going to be at the end of time. What he's trying to say is, just figure out. Worry about focus our energy on our educating of kids. And again, we're not going to get into the details how he figures that out. But based on the placement of Psalms 2 and 3, he's saying that our job is not to worry about Gog and Magog, about the end of times, exactly how it's going to happen. Our job is to make sure that we're raising children who are mensch, and we're raising them in the Torah way. And by the way, just on the side, Chassidus says that remember from last time that Mashiach can come in two different circumstances, either by virtue or by time. Hashem put a time limit, but by virtue we could bring him closer. So Chassidus says that it could be because of virtue there will be no war, or the length of the gullus and severity of the exile and suffering that cancels out the necessity for great calamity. And one rabbi, I think the Samach Tzedek says, the war of Gog and Magog already happened. That whole concept happened. So don't worry about it. Our job is to determine it. Okay. So far, any questions? Yay, nay? No? All right. There you go. Now, 261. Many of the headline biblical redemption prophecies pertain to material blessings, such as health, abundance, that will prevail in Messianic times. Let's revisit from lesson number 1 for insight as to why material blessings are critical for redemption purposes. Because from here, we're going to get into another important topic, the resurrection of the dead. Because if you think about it, I mean, we've touched on the subject before in other classes. If the soul is so much better than the body, why would God make the soul come back into the body? Or one of the things we answered in lesson number 1, why is Mashiach coming represented by an abundance of material blessing? We're going to serve God the whole day. Why do we care the fact that we're going to eat pizza? Pizza is good, right? Okay. So you see it's figure 6.3, right? We have all these Messianic prophecies, war, crime, right? We discussed this at length at the source and the possibility, plausibility, and how they're coming true in lesson 1. But But here it is. Maimonides asked this question: why do we care about material blessings? If Mashiach comes, we're going to be learning Torah. If it's going to be a spiritual pursuit, why do we care about material blessings? So Maimonides answered, and it's a lengthy text, text 11, page 263. Because if I ask you, why don't you learn why do you learn the entire day? Why can't you pray with all your concentration? Because you say, I'm distracted. I have these foreign thoughts, or what happens is I'm worried about money, I'm worried about this, right? You can't just walk through the old city of Jerusalem. Why do you need the Israeli soldiers to be? Why? So Maimonides is saying that all these material blessings are a tool to enable us to serve God. We're not going to have to worry about all these different things. We'll be able to concentrate on the main thing. Remember that line? The main thing is to keep the main thing. So we'll be able to concentrate on the main thing, which is serving God. And we won't have to worry about where our next meal is going to come from. And we're not going to have to worry about security. So even now, they figured out how to get great bounty out of a lesser amount of agriculture and planting. So it says, when Mashiach comes, the third paragraph, we do not long and hope for the Messianic era simply because we desire an abundance of produce and property, or wish to ride horses, or drink wine or whiskey, or the company of music, as some confused people think. Rather, our prophets and pious yearn for that era, because then the righteous will assemble and good conduct and wisdom will prevail. It will be possible, this is the key, to observe the entire Torah without the worry of fear, of disease, of sickness, of hunger, of anything else. The old joke goes, a teacher passes out a paper and asks the class, what would you do if you won $1 million in the lottery? Write down your response. So it goes around and one kid's answer is blank. So how come you didn't write anything? Because that's exactly what I would do if I won the lottery. Nothing, right? So Maimonides again is going through all these unmiraculous effects, the model of redemption. He's saying nothing is going to change. We're just going to be able to do what we could do now, were it not. So all those were it nots are going to be those impediments are going to be removed, and now we're going to be able to concentrate. So what it talks about in the prophet and the Talmudic times about all these miraculous things, Maimonides said they're metaphors, that there's going to be peace, abundance, security. So we'll be able to concentrate on what on what we're supposed to be, spiritual people, and because we have physical, material needs, those will be provided for in a lot easier fashion. And as we discussed in lesson 1, that is already coming through. The minimal effort will produce tremendous yield, which we spoke about at length, and this will enable a distraction-free life to serve God. Okay. Now, here's the issue. Until now, we've been talking about Maimonides' view of the world and how everything Maimonides says can take place in a miracle-free environment, right? No rules of nature have to be broken. It's happening now, right? Abundance, we're living longer. We can, think about it. If we have a vaccine for COVID in a year, and did they prove that Alzheimer, FDA was a whole vote today. They're going to approve. It was controversial, but imagine they cure Alzheimer's and degeneration of the brain. I mean, all these things are taking place. But there's one thing that I don't care what you say, is miraculous. People coming back to life, no matter how you slice it, it seems to be miraculous. There's a great joke about the resurrection of the dead. The very rich man, Fred the miser, is dying, and he calls the rabbi, and he says, "Rabbi, I would like to give you all my money." So Rabbi says, sure, how would you like for me to disperse the funds to charities? He says, no, Rabbi, I don't want you to give it to the charities. I want you to hold on to the money. He says, hold on to the money. Why would I do that? To give to the next rabbi after you. He says, that's the craziest thing I ever heard in my life. Because Rabbi, you don't believe in resurrection of the dead? Right? So, I mean, at some point, you got to believe, right? Hey, right? I think it was a sign. Remember when one of the teams were in the playoffs, and everyone thought they were going to lose, and they had signed, "Hey, you got to believe," right? You know, the sickness I can explain. The war and the peace and abundance, all that I can explain naturally, but the resurrection of the dead, you got to believe. So listen to what Maimonides wrote, because Maimonides actually addressed this, because people wrote to him. It's what you don't believe in Maimonides. It's interesting because Maimonides writes, principle 13 of the 13 principles is, I believe in the resurrection of the dead. On the other hand, he says, everything's going to happen naturally. So they wrote to Maimonides, like, which one is it? So he writes, look at text number 12. He says like this. He says, what I said that certain things are allegorically, no one told me that. That's the way I understand it. Maimonides says, is it possible I'm wrong? That certain things that the prophets say are going to be literal? Yes. And the second paragraph, I strive to bring harmony between the Torah and human intellect in every way. But where human intellect can't understand, yes, it's going to be a miracle. Maimonides doesn't say that miracles can't happen. Maimonides doesn't say miracles won't happen for sure. Maimonides just tries to take the prophecies as explained in the Torah and express them through the vein of human intellect. But where it doesn't make sense, like the resurrection of the dead, then it'll be a miracle. It's not one or the other. And what Maimonides says again at the end, we will have to wait for their realization. May it occur speedily in our days to discover whether these statements refer to actual miracles or the simple allegories or natural changes. So going back to what we said last time, a lot of it depends on if we're worthy or not worthy. Chassidus explained, if we're worthy, then there'll be miracles. If we're not worthy, and at the time, then it'll be natural. Then it'll be natural. The Rebbe also says that one thing's for sure: things are going to happen in stages. So it's very possible. Again, this is speculation, not by bums like me. Speculation by great men, which means they have weight to them. Says it could be that in the beginning, it's going to be a natural, gradual transformation, and then later things will turn more miraculous. There's a video I want to show you, JLI, where someone asks him, according to science, can there be resurrection of the dead? I think it's next slide.
Hi, Chris. A recent article in a scientific journal proposed bringing a woolly mammoth back to life by taking its DNA and recreating somewhat similar to the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park back. So in some sense, is this the resurrection of the dead, Tchiyat HaMetim? Is this perhaps how Hashem will bring humans back to life when Mashiach comes?
I'm aware of that particular project, but it's not by any stretch of the imagination the first of its kind. Already a number of years ago, petrified seeds were found near Masada in Israel of a plant species that's believed to have been extinct for 1,000 years. They were able to extract a reasonably good, intact sample of their DNA and through an elaborate process boot them up into new living cells, and for the last 5 or odd years those plants are now growing again. An even further example, they took a extinct lion that had been in a jar for the last 100 years or so in a university laboratory. We're also able to extract its DNA and to get an embryo going through gesthesis inside the womb of a mouse. I guess it would have been the mouse that roared if it could have carried it to full term. It could not, but it is the first example of an animal actually starting to grow biologically that had been extinct for a significant period of time. And what all this points to is a notion that in the Messianic age, many of these things that historically would have been regarded as miraculous will become part of our expanded understanding of nature. That nature itself will be unified with God above nature. The two will become one. Hashem hu Elokim. We say God was above nature is equivalent and one and the same with God as nature. God is identical with the laws of nature, even though God also transcends them. And so we will see that this is part of the fabric of the universe, that things come back. And this is just the beginning. It's going to get wild from here.
Thank you very much.
So my purpose of including this video was to show that things that the prophets and the rabbis said back then, which was far out. Like, for example, it says we're going to be returned to the land of Israel on the wings of an eagle. Now, most modern people understand that it's an airplane. If you would have told someone 1,000 years ago there's going to be a boat that flies, I mean, that's crazy talk. But again, to tie in what really won't work, because this is the last class of the course, that nature doesn't stand in opposition to God. Nature is really an expression of God's wisdom in creation. What we're doing as human beings, as humanity, is we're figuring that out piece by piece. So everything that's happening here, maybe we don't understand how it will happen, but it's not that, okay, Mashiach comes, nature is going to go by the wayside, and now we're going to have this new reality. No, the nature, as we know it, is going to express the godliness and the godly wisdom that was there all along. And as we're saying, it really depends on, if we're worthy or not worthy. But one thing is very important to keep in mind. The fact, not the fact, but whether or not there will be miracles when Mashiach comes, that's not the central belief to the redemption. Mashiach is going to come, and we're going to go to the land of Israel, temple, and Sanhedrin, and everything else. Now, how it's going to happen, whether it's going to be a gradual, natural process or a radical, miraculous process, doesn't make a difference. Right? I want pizza. I'm hungry. Now, how it comes, DoorDash or Uber Eats, I don't care. I just want pizza. Right? I mean, again, it's a very silly example, but we believe in the coming of Mashiach. Now, how it's going to happen? It'll happen. Miracles may occur. They may not occur. But that doesn't go to the belief in the coming of Mashiach. Okay, let's bring it home. Maybe one of the most important topics. Why is Tchias HaMesim? Why is the resurrection of the dead so important? Why does that gotta happen? The 13th principle. Some people believe it, because it's like it's a reward, right? After because think about it this way: the soul did mitzvahs, and the soul didn't do mitzvahs on its own. The soul needed the body to do mitzvahs. So would it make sense only for the soul to enjoy bliss and all that? That's not fair. So in order to enjoy reward, so the soul has to come back into the body. That's okay, but that's a good theory. But based on what we learned in classes 2, 3, and 4, that the very reason why God created the world is not to be up there in the spiritual realm, was to be down here. The ultimate is not up there. The ultimate is down here. It says in the Midrash or in the Gemara that the angels wish to be able to come down here and say, Amen Yehesh Mirabu. They up there, they sense, they understand the preciousness of the opportunities that we have. So now that all the impediments and all the distractions of our physical material selves, the money, the work, and all that is going to be removed, and we'll be able to concentrate and do the mitzvah properly, right? We'll be able to imagine being able to pray without distractions. To us, it's like, okay, it's impossible. I'm always thinking about something else. But imagine you were able to pray without distraction. Just concentrate on what says there. Not for 10 seconds, for a full, 2 hours. To learn, and there's nothing else going on, just to learn. That's the ultimate. So the reason why Chesed Mason is so important is because it goes to the very creation of the world. The spirituality and materiality blending together to serve God. It's not an either or. Now it is the very reason why Hashem created the world. So when the soul comes into the body, we're taking the physical, which used to be an obstacle, which used to be a concealment, which used to get in the way, and now we're transforming it. Not we're obliterating it. Not, so it means that there's no physical world anymore. No. Now we're taking it, what was just physical, or what was before standing in the way. Now we're utilizing it in the service of Hashem. That's why it has to be that way. Because until the soul comes back into the body, and the body is a perfect conduit for godly action, then the purpose hasn't been recognized. So how do we get there? Let's go back to Maimonides, because it would only seem right that we go back to Maimonides. We started a whole class, almost a whole course has been Maimonides. Maimonides says like this: you got to view yourself as everything relies on you. Text 14. You should view yourself at all times as equally balanced with merits and faults, and the world similarly equally balanced with merits and faults. Therefore, if you perform, you are on the screen and you are going to watch this on YouTube later, one mitzvah, you tip the balance. Now, think of it this way. Imagine you go to someone and say, put on tefillin, light Shabbos candles. And you're thinking, what's a big deal? That's only one person. But imagine I get someone to put on tefillin. You get someone to put on tefillin. And 50,000 other people get someone to put on tefillin. Or you get 50,000 other people to light Shabbos candles. That makes a difference. And your own and that old mankind affect a personal and global deliverance and salvation. So the idea is the transformation of the physical world happens through small acts. It's not like Maimonides says. It's not just one, Mashiach is going to come with his wand and kaboom. It's the gradual process. The natural process is small, you ever watch those videos of time lapse and you see the sun, the days pass very, very quickly. Now, if you're standing there, you don't see any transition. You don't see any difference. It's only afterwards you see it happening very, very quickly. So that's where we are. We have to realize that we're part of that transition. We're in that movie, and we got to do that. And one mitzvah, and we don't like Rabbi Shimon said, the author of the Mishnah. We don't know the value of one mitzvah. You don't know. You don't know the impact of your one act. But if you minimize yourself, you say, I don't matter, then Mashiach can't come, because you are here. Remember, in God's movie, there are no extras. God is perfect. Everything he does perfect. So you are here to realize God's mission in the world, to bring Mashiach, to perfect the world. If you don't act and you don't do your part, then imagine the entire world can't realize its purpose. I'll end up with a story, a mashal. Once a poor man came to a house and he was cold, and he asked her, and it was a big banquet, a rich man. Do you have any clothing for me? He said, sure, go to the attic, and we have a lot of clothing there, and he went back to his party. And in the main hall, there was this beautiful, the rich man's most prized possession was this beautiful, massive, tremendous chandelier, many crystals and glass and candles. And the poor man went to the attic and he found some clothing and he found the bag, and he said, I'm going to carry the bag. I need some rope to close the bag. And he saw over there by the coming out of the ceiling was some rope. So he took out his pocket knife and he cut a little piece of knife. All of a sudden he heard a tremendous smash. He came down and he had his rope, and he said, all I wanted was a little bit of rope. The rich man said, yes, but your little bit of rope caused a massive, massive reaction. It's not only that for the negative, it's more, way more for the positive. Your small bit of rope, your mitzvah, I guess my own show is kicking me up. Your mitzvah can be the one to bring Mashiach. So let's not wait, get started. Make sure tonight you say Shema, and tomorrow morning you say Shema, and make sure you do more mitzvahs. And Mitzvah Shem, this class will not be just abstract. We'll see Mashiach in the flesh. We'll go back to Eretz Yisrael, and in security, we'll build the Beis Mikdash, and Jew and Gentile will walk together in the service of God, maybe speedily in our days. Amen.
Amen. And I got a question.
What's that?
The message you have for the whole world about the Mashiach.
She was printed in all the press of all the countries. The Mashiach is ready to come now. It is only from our part to do something additional in the realm of goodness and kindness.
So people should be doing goodness and kindness for him to come.
At least a little more than Mashiach will come immediately. That's what gives to charity, the double portion of charity.
Thank you, Rabbi. You're very kind. Thank you, Rabbi.
Double portion of kindness.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Double portion. Double portion.
Maimonides ist auf deine Stimme von Mashiach jetzt.
Amen. The Mashiach. The series says, Amen. The Mashiach. Der Mavzaka Mashiach soll kommen schneller.
So that was the message of the Rebbe. Our job is to bring Mashiach, and he didn't just talk about it, he gave out dollars to get it started. Yeah, Ira, question before we do key points.
Question. Has to do with the resurrection.
Okay.
If somebody is being resurrected, are they being resurrected as their 90-year-old person, or are they being resurrected as their 20-year-old person?
Resurrected as they were when they passed away. But the 90-year-old won't be frail and he'll be firm, because again, there will be no more sickness, and all of that will be cured.
I'm all for that.
All for that. So you have the wisdom of 90, but the bodily youth of 20. How's that?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to you. All right. Keep any other questions before we go to key points? All right, key points.
Lesson 6. And then. 1. In his halachic code, Maimonides states that we should not presume that the world's nature will change in the Messianic era. Prophecies implying otherwise are to be understood as allegories. That said, this era will be marked by huge changes. 2. One radical change, a complete end to antisemitism and total independence for the Jewish people. 3. Mashiach will rebuild the Jerusalem temple to the applause of all nations, who will recognize the benefit that God's sacred home offers the entire world. 4. Non-Jews will also experience the redemption. The Jewish redemption is a universal concept. 5. Building the temple will cause the global ingathering of all Jews, who will recognize its great sanctity and desire a share in its environs. 6. The return of the 10 lost tribes is a matter of Talmudic dispute. Some attribute the uncertainty to the tribes' assumed assimilation. Regardless, it is undisputed that all 12 tribes will be represented in the land of Israel. 7. The possibility of observing all of the Torah's laws will return due to the existence of the Jewish monarch and temple and the reality of Jews living securely on their land. 8. The Sanhedrin, forced to disband centuries ago, will return. One resultant change will be that the Jewish calendar will revert to a system of observation. 9. The Jewish prophets mention a great war associated with the Messianic era, but the prophecies are difficult to interpret with any certainty. Rabbi Shimon demonstrates by applying Psalms 2 to this war that the threat and tumult will amount to nothing. 10. The cessation of war, crime, poverty, scarcity, and disability will enable us to fully fulfill the purpose for which God created us without pain or worry. 11. In his Epistle on Resurrection, Maimonides clarified that nature-altering miracles may indeed occur in the Messianic era. We are aware of one, the resurrection of the dead, but others are possible as well. 12. The resurrection is important because it will enable all who participated in making this world into a home for God to share in the magnificent outcome. It will also demonstrate the complete spiritual transformation of the body and, by extension, the entire physical world.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be the end of Zoom. After this, we're going in person. That's it. We're taking off the crutch. Now you guys got to learn to walk again. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you can join us for Kalman's upsharing, his haircut next Thursday. It's going to be a great celebration. We should only get together for celebrations. Thank you so much for joining us. And stop share.
Thank you, Modi.
I'll see you on Shabbos.
See you on Shabbos.